After this last game, you kind of talked that you felt like it was collectively your best defensive effort of the season. Just what kind of challenge do you feel like Rice will present tomorrow, and just what you got to carry over from that performance against Incarnate Word?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between the two teams in terms of how fast they like to play. I think Rice is in the top 10 nationally in terms of tempo, the speed of the game. You know, they average over 80 points a game. Their only loss this year is when somebody held them in the 60s. It seems to me like if they can score 80 points, they can beat everybody. They got multiple three-point shooters, not just shooters, like really good shooters. I think they have 40% three-point shooters in their starting lineup. So they're a team we have a lot of respect for. They've just got a really good team. They passed the eye test. They've won 3 road games. I wouldn't think that anybody else in the country has 3 road games wins at this point. They're 3-0 on the road, so they have our full attention. I think our guys understand how well we're going to have to play.
I know they've had 16 guys play so far, but they really only have like 7 guys in the rotation. So I guess how have you kind of seen how they're kind of splitting up minutes, because they kind of stick to their top 5 and then only go to a couple other guys?
Yeah, I think it's about a 9-man rotation. What I saw, they have 2 quality perimeter players come off the bench. One of them's a freshman, which shows their roster's in great shape. They're playing experienced guys and young guys. Then they have the 2 post players that come off the bench. So obviously Evans gets a lot of attention because he's a special player, preseason conference player of the year. That speaks for itself. But then they've got some really, really good, secondary players as well.
You had kind of touched on their three-point shooting, but Evans seems like a guy who, obviously likes to get it inside, get his shots kind of, inside the circle. How do you kind of avoid with some of the three-point shooting that they do have, not getting too sucked in and allowing some of those guys to knock out when they kick it out?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. If you want to try to stop the drive, they have perimeter shooters. If you want to try to stop the shot, then they've got guys that can make plays in the paint, as you mentioned. So it's a real challenge. It'll have to be team defense. We don't have anybody on our roster that can guard Evans one-on-one. So it'll have to be a real team effort, different people stepping up at different times of the game.
Going to your own guys, Zach, I think, is the leading field goal percentage shooter in the Big 12 so far this year. And I know some of that has to do with dunks, but I guess a lot of that speaks to the way he's kind of developed his mid-range shot, because it seems like if he takes one of those, he's almost always going to hit it.
Yeah, I think so. I think Zach deserves a lot of credit. He was a good freshman at this level, and then he took the next step of his game last year. He was noticeably different to me from his freshman year to his sophomore year. I think the previous coaching staff deserves a lot of that credit, but above all, Zach deserves the credit. He's put in the time. And then I think he's taken the next step between his sophomore and junior year. He's, things as simple as he leads our fast break a lot, bringing the ball up the floor as a guard. He guards multiple people. I thought last game against Incarnate Word, Johnson's obviously a special player. Zach guarded him one-on-one for several minutes of that game. So I think above all, Zach deserves credit for being a guy that seems to be improving throughout his college career.
And speaking of that Incarnate Word game, it seemed like Anthony might have been off his game offensively a little bit. Didn't ever seem to get in rhythm. I guess what did you kind of see from him in that game?
Yeah, I think, great players, and I'd put Anthony in that category. Let the game come to him. He got us the first basket of the game the other night, and he just didn't get a lot of shot attempts. But him and I were both, wondering about that. I wouldn't say we were frustrated, but it didn't seem like he was getting a lot of shots. But after going back and watching the film, it was very obvious that Incarnate Word's focal point, their defensive game plan, was Anthony. I thought he did a great job letting the game come to him. His assist to Zach in the second half against the double team, he did get loose for a jump shot late. So I think above all, Anthony's a basketball player. He's not just a scorer. He's a guy that lets the game come to him, and I was really impressed with his game the other night in a lot of ways.
Now that you're 7 games in, do you feel like you are where you thought you would be at this point in the year? Higher or lower? Where did you kind of project where you felt like this team would be before the season and where you are now?
It's a fair question. I'm not really wired like that. My deal is we just try to get better every day. Obviously, there's been some positives. Different people have stepped up. We've obviously had some adversity. I don't like playing without Norrance and Ross. Those are 2 of our main players. But we have a next man up mentality. There's no excuses. So that's probably been the biggest thing is we've overcome adversity in terms of injuries. I hope that these guys can get back well and we won't have to deal with that the rest of the season. But I think we've proven that we can be a good defensive team, obviously. I think we've proven that we have some depth on offense where different guys can step up. But our team continues to be a work in progress, but I like where we're at this point.
We'll do a couple
Coach, I guess just the difficulty around this time of year where you guys are playing so many games in such a limited amount of days, finals right around the corner too, Christmas, you know, just a couple weeks ahead. It's crazy. It's already December, but just keeping guys locked in through this non-conference stretch.
Yeah, it's a really unique time in our sport. I think college basketball is different than any other sport in this. You know, we're a 2-semester sport, which means we play through final exams and the Christmas break. So, I mean, our guys right now, we have guys that are taking final exams right now, plus we're playing 4 games in a 6-day period. So it's a challenging time. I think what separates, you know, good teams from great or teams that can really be a contender is what each individual player chooses to do with their day and their time management. You know, obviously our team's not going to get accelerate our growth like we want it by just showing up every day at 3:30. There's so much more than just team practice. And what I like about our team with these experienced players are we've got guys that are in the gym, it seems like, throughout the day. You know, the 300 Club's been well documented. We've got guys that shoot in the mornings, between classes at night. So I think really it's just really difficult to practice this time of year. And so the individual time is really, really important. And I think that's one of the good things about our team so far is our guys have shown a love of basketball and a desire to be in the gym, you know, which helps.
Just curious, I know you guys spend plenty of time out on the road recruiting and scouting these guys, but with how many guys that you've brought in, especially that came from either the JUCO level or a non-Power 5 school, whether it was a grad transfer or just a transfer in general, have you been surprised how it seems like you've hit on most of them? I mean, I know we're not into Big 12 play yet, but they're obviously seeing good minutes in the starting 5.
Yeah, not surprised, but pleased. You know, I have a lot of confidence in our process and our culture. I believe in what we do. You know, I don't think that we're better than anybody else. We respect everybody, but I don't think there's anybody in college basketball that's better than us. And it's not arrogance, it's just confidence and it's belief and it's work. And so I knew we had some talented players, and I knew that once they got involved in our culture, that if they bought in, we could do some good things, and they bought in. The players deserve all the credit. I mean, we got guys that are literally playing different roles than they ever have in their career, and you have to be very unselfish to do that. I mean, about a year ago today, I was at Little Rock about to play against Anthony Livingston at Arkansas State, and he was approaching and playing the game totally different. He's playing for a great coach and Coach Brady, but he had to play the game different than he did here. Gio is a guy that I think deserves a lot of credit. Here was a guy that's basically the best player on his team for 3 years at Quinnipiac. He comes here, he's playing a different role, and he's really embraced that role. So I think the story is our players' unselfishness to this point.